Hello again, everybody. My name's Bob Dolan. Welcome, as always, to Wisconsin Icons. It's good to have you with me. My sponsors are Pasternak and Zergabel, award-winning injury attorneys. Their website is www.injurywisconsin.com. And my other title sponsor is the great folks at Town Bank, www.townbank.us. My icon today is one of the great and most successful Wisconsin businesses of the last half century, Cousins Subs. Everybody knows Cousins. Everybody loves them. It started with one store, two guys, one dream, and here we are about over a half century later, and they're all over Wisconsin, as you know, and they're even expanding now into other states. Before I welcome my guest, however, just a real quick story about my first experience with Cousins. As many of you know, I'm not from Wisconsin. I grew up elsewhere. But the night before my job interview here in Milwaukee, this is way back in the early 1980s, I got to town the night before, taxied to my hotel. I didn't know a thing about Milwaukee, where to go, what to eat. So I noticed a place called Cousins Subs in the parking lot across from my hotel. So after I checked in, I asked the gentleman at the desk, is that Cousins place a good place to eat? He says, oh, of course, everybody in Wisconsin loves Cousins. So I walked across the parking lot and bought my first ever Cousins Subs. I'm quite sure it was chicken cheddar deluxe. And I walked across back to my room, ate my chicken cheddar deluxe. About 5 minutes later, I put my shoes back on, walked back across the parking lot, ordered another chicken cheddar deluxe. And in the 40 or 50 years since then, I probably had about 1 billion of them. I love them. But they're a great company, a great story. They're great for community service. And I'm very proud to welcome now to Wisconsin Icons their CEO, Christine Specht. Well, Christine, hello. Welcome to Wisconsin Icons. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
As you know, Cousins itself is iconic. You've taken on the iconic role now of CEO. But you just celebrated 50, is that correct? I mean, that's in this niche especially, this is hugely competitive. 50 is a big deal.
Yeah, we celebrate our 50th anniversary in 2022. So
Okay.
we're already at 52. And it is iconic, really, because I think restaurants, particularly,
Yeah.
if anybody that runs a restaurant or is involved in restaurants, they know how difficult it can be. And you can't always ebb and flow with the changes from what consumers want, changes in the economy. And we've just been really blessed at Cousins throughout our whole time to be able to bob and weave as we've needed to.
We all know Cousins. I mean, you're one of the familiar businesses in the entire state, but a lot of us don't know the start. So take us back to 52 years. Where does it come from? Who's responsible? Tell us the process.
Sure. So my dad and his cousin, it's where we got the name.
There you go.
So we cousin Subs. And that was in 1972. And so, my dad was from New Jersey and married my mom, who's from Milwaukee. And she was very clear about staying in Milwaukee. So after he finished his time in the Navy, where they did spend a year in Jacksonville, Florida, they moved to Milwaukee, and he really got out of the Navy and started doing work at a printing job, right? So he was a printer, working on the presses, and it was okay work, but he didn't love it. It wasn't his passion. So
Yeah.
Ultimately he got laid off, and then he said, you know what? I think I want to start my own thing. So him and my mom talked about it, and he recruited his cousin Jim, who was still living in Atlantic City at the time, and recruited him and his family to come out to Milwaukee and start this Cousin Subs, this single sub shop restaurant on 60th and Silver Spring.
Where does that idea, I mean, I assume when they decide, let's do something on our own, I'm assuming a submarine shop is not the first thing that pops to mind. Did they think of other things, or were they always centered on, the fast food type of thing?
My dad was centered on that, specifically on sub sandwiches, because he grew up in Atlantic City, or suburbs of Atlantic City. And there was a particular sub shop called the White House. And it's still in Atlantic City today. It's just, not a very large restaurant. And yet they serve these iconic sub sandwiches that he grew up with and that he missed terribly since living in Milwaukee. So he really thought, you know what? I think I could bring this idea of this East Coast style sub sandwich to Milwaukee. So he wasn't really contemplating other ideas
Yeah.
because this was something that he was really missing and also really passionate about and had some amount of confidence that he could do it successfully. Of course, they never knew what to expect. They were just hoping for one well-run restaurant where they could support their families. This wasn't,
Yeah.
they didn't have deep pockets and lots of money. And so it was really something that they said, let's give it a try and hopefully we'll make a go of it.
Now, so this is the early 1970s. So
Hmm.
I can remember this era very well, Christine, because that's when I began high school. And if
Hmm.
I recall correctly, I didn't grow up in Wisconsin. I'm from Missouri. But
Yeah.
at that time, I can remember all the fast food hamburger places, McDonald's, Burger King, Burger Chef. I don't know if you ever heard of Burger Chef,
Mm-mm.
A&W, Dog and Suds. I cannot recall a place like a Cousins. Now, I'm sure there was. You mentioned the White House, but that's New Jersey. In this part of the country, was this a new thing? Was this kind of, and is that another reason they chose it? To let's throw something new at the consumer?
Well, I thought and I wasn't quite born yet when they
I know
started.
that.
So I'm going off of memory from what I've heard from
I'm gonna
stories,
have to
but
end this interview very quickly if you keep going.
right. So there was Suburbia, which
Yes, all right,
you
all
know,
right.
so that was one restaurant that was serving sub sandwiches. And then there was another one, I think on Farwell, Gold Coast Subs or something. I'm not familiar with it, but that's
Uh-huh.
what people have said to me when they've said, hey, I remember Cousins from the 70s, those were kind of that sounded like the two competitors of the time. So
Yeah,
not really well. No, right. You're exactly right, Bob. This idea of East Coast style sub sandwiches, the hoagie, the hero,
right,
whatever
right,
you want to call it,
right.
it wasn't as prominent as a
Yeah.
burger was.
And I'm sure they were big in Philadelphia, other places all out east, but here this is kind of which may have led to their initial success. Hey, this is new. This is something different. Let's try it.
I think that's exactly the case.
Yeah.
In fact, when they started it, they were really, really, they held fast to the values that they wanted to bring in terms of the type of product quality. So it had to be baked on Italian bread. So they went to great lengths to find the baker that would bake the bread recipe that they worked with the baker from Atlantic City and developing. So they were really passionate about making sure that it wasn't just another sub on a bun, that it was actually something that was truly what they were bringing in their minds and bringing a piece of the East Coast to the Midwest.
Was it a hit right away or did they struggle early on?
Well, I think they probably did about maybe $20 in sales on the first day. If I could probably find the record books. I know we still have them somewhere, the ledgers. Uh, but I think it caught on fairly quickly.
Okay.
But it wasn't without so much work, right? So much work. These when entrepreneurs start something, it's the hours and hours of love and labor that they put into this, whatever their concept is, in this case, the subs, it just is, it's exciting, but it's also exhausting. So, my dad had told stories of, he would, uh, they'd get there first thing in the morning, right? Prep the restaurant, get the bread ready. You work all day and then you might close. Well, like when they had their second location on Farwell, they were closing after bar time because they were very, very popular when the
Yeah.
bars closed. So you're working that lane, you're driving home only to get up in the morning and do it all over again because they certainly didn't have the depth of staff and support that they had. So that was really something that they were doing. My mom was the first cashier, but she turned and was raising my brother who's 3 years older than me. And then when I came along, so so she, and Jim's wife, Mary, she was also at home. So, it was really my dad and Jim. And of course they hired people because you can't do it all by yourself. And it grew from there, but it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah. And you come into the picture when?
Well, of course, it was my first job when I was
Yeah.
15, and I still
Okay.
remember my first day working at the location in Germantown, which is still there today. So, cashiering and all that. Of course, grew up with it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
my brother and I would ride around in the bread vans and, and just visit the corporate office and visit the restaurants. And it was just a lot. They're like, it was just part of who we are, right? And growing up, it was certainly that way. So, became a cashier, sandwich maker, in at the sub shop and really enjoyed it through my high school years into college. stepped back, then didn't work at Cousins professionally until 2001 when I came on as the human resources manager. So
Okay.
my parents were really great in that way. They let me kind of fashion my own interests
Yeah.
instead of saying, hey, this is our dream, our restaurant. Now it's going to be your dream and your restaurant. So, and I think that was really a key point in helping me shape who I am today. And yet, and eventually coming back to the family business um, wholeheartedly without it feeling forced at all. So,
Absolutely.
so '01 to '08, I was in HR, and then in
Okay.
2008 became, uh, had any number of these titles, right? COO,
Yeah, yeah,
president,
yeah.
that sort of thing.
So about 15 years, 15,
Yeah,
16 years.
it goes by
Uh,
fast.
I know lots of people, Christine, who have, for lack of a better term, taken over
Mhm.
the family business. And most of them tell me, especially in the early years, how hard it is to honor the past and honor the people who built it, and yet still put your own fingerprints on it without offending anybody or without anybody getting mad at you or, oh, there she goes. Look what she, how do you balance that? How do you do that? How do you know when it's right to do?
It's a great question because, as I've said to so many people, my dad and his cousin, they were the true entrepreneurs, right? They started with nothing, or a few $1,000s, and they grew the business. I wasn't really, I'm not the entrepreneur. I'm just here to kind of help continue the process, right? So, and it was interesting because at the time that I took the lead in the company, by that time, my dad's partner had already passed away. And we were really at this inflection point of, do we keep on with the business as the way it is?
Yeah.
Do we sell the business? What do we do? There were two outside presidents in between my dad and me, kind of during that time in that middle, kind of aught six, aught seven, that sort of thing. So, there were these outside kind of leaders, and yet that didn't feel quite right either. So when it came time and I talked to my dad, and I'm like, look, I think we can do something here. You know, I think we don't have to let this company go to sell or whatever. And so, after we talked about it and he gave me the opportunity, he really let go, which I found and still find to be so fascinating because wasn't that type of person. He would not that he would second guess me, but he's always telling you to read the manuals, get 3 quotes, do all these things, be smart, be smart. And yet at the same time, when he put me in this position, I think in the sense he trusted me, and he knew full well that I didn't know everything about the company. I certainly did not, but he trusted me and he knew that I would have the best interest of the company in mind. So
Mhm.
that then allowed him to really let go. And I knew enough to know what to respect for the brand, which was the quality of the product. And I also knew what we needed to change. So it was less about me making an imprint or putting my hand on the business, less about that, and really more about, all right, this company is, 25 plus years old. If we want to stick around for the next 20 some years, we're going to have to make changes.
Absolutely.
And that's uncomfortable. So that's going to cost money. That's going to mean changes. That's going to mean people
Yeah.
changing in and out. And so those were not great, not easy times, but yet they were necessary times because I felt and still feel, of course, that Cousins can have this longevity and this continued success
Mhm.
and more so. But at that time there, things really needed to change. And my dad was very willing to make the necessary investment and put that trust in me to say, all right, let's see what you have. And we've been able to do that and make many positive changes, even though none of it was easy to go through.
I assume you, especially again in the early years, Christine, there were days when you thought, or at least when you assumed that some people would be saying, "Oh, she's Bill's daughter."
Mhm.
Uh, do you still have? I mean, do you still feel like you have to prove yourself?
Not really. I think that he he gave me the latitude to run the company, and I think that was really good enough for people, right? He and of course, the business has ebbed and flowed, and there's new people
Yeah.
in and out. People that have really only known my dad in the tail end, of his life, and versus people that knew him when he was actively running the business, right? So I think that I don't feel the need to prove myself, but at the same time, I don't really want to screw it up either, right? So it's really about making sure that I'm putting in the right plans for growth, the right plans, making sure I have the right people, and making sure that I'm doing these things correctly. I make plenty of mistakes along the way. There's no doubt about it, but it's not so much that I feel like I have to prove it to anyone, but maybe continue to prove it to myself,
Excellent.
right? That
Yeah, yeah,
I can do this job,
yeah.
mistakes and all, imperfections and all, but I can still do this and carry this company forward, for maybe the next generation.
How many are there now?
We currently have 93 restaurants.
Okay.
56 of those are owned corporately.
All right.
So that has really changed too over the years.
Yeah.
We had one time we had 40 corporately owned restaurants. We had as low as 8. For a long time, we had 16. And then really over these past 5 years or so, our existing franchise community has maybe wanted to retire. They had 20 years in, they ran a good business, but they were ready to get out. And then it was an opportunity for corporate to come in and buy those restaurants as opposed to refranchising them to somebody else.
Sure.
There's no perfect formula for what a restaurant company or a business should do. It just felt right for us to then start to acquire because I had the infrastructure to support those restaurants. So we've grown now where we have 56 corporate locations. I don't know that we'll always have 56 locations. Maybe we'll have 60, maybe we'll have fewer. It just kind of depends on where we are with our staffing, our labor, our ability to make and run restaurants and make and sell subs.
You're also out of state now, correct?
We are.
Yeah,
We
good.
are in Indiana. So
Okay.
we opened up our first location in Indianapolis in January, and we actually just opened up our second location last week. So the plan, what we believe is that Cousins has a great footprint in Wisconsin, and it certainly is our bread and butter, so to speak. So we feel that we can take that.
That one never gets old, I bet.
I know, right? I've never heard that before. It just came to
Right,
me.
right.
So, but I feel that we can have similar success in Indianapolis. It's a thriving market. There's a lot of Midwestern sensibilities and similarities to Milwaukee. Yet it's a very expensive road to go down, to grow new units,
Sure.
particularly outside of the state. You're just, there's a lot of newness happening. So nothing comes easy or quickly. And yet we still have this belief, because I have amazing people that work here who believe right along with me, that we're going to make an imprint in Indy, and we're going to really do it well.
I don't have to tell you, Christine, but you don't have to drive too far from home or too far from your office to see your competitors. I mean,
Mhm.
they're everywhere now. I
Right.
referenced earlier back when you started, this was kind of a new deal. It isn't a new thing anymore. How do you stay at or near the top? What are the challenges today to being as impactful and as popular as you have been for 50 years?
Well, it is competitive. There's no doubt about it. And, I try to tell people too that, like I said, we have about 100 restaurants, right? These other competitors can have 2,000, 3,000, fifty
Yeah,
thousand restaurants, right? They're huge,
yeah, yeah.
right? And they've grown quickly and in many different ways. And that's fine. That kudos for them. Uh, we just like to stay focused on what we're doing. I tell my teams every single day, we make and sell sub sandwiches, and we need to do that very well. And we need to do that as often as we possibly can, because we have opportunities to grow and continue to expand the brand. And I try to worry less about what our competitors are doing and try to stay focused on what matters to us, right? We're grilled and deli fresh. So we have that grill, which is a key differentiator from most of our competitors. We have amazing and indulgent sides, right? From shakes to cheese curds to chili cheese fries. I mean, it's fantastic, right? They're really good stuff. Those things, along with our values, our history, that's how we differentiate ourselves. So it's less about what everybody else is doing, and it's more about keeping the teams focused on what we're doing here, why it's special, and why we need to continue to do it. So, because there's always going to be a competitor. And
Yeah,
if it's not a sub sandwich competitor,
yeah.
I'm fighting for everybody, for all the shares of dollars when people go out to lunch, right? You might go to another sandwich shop, you might go to a pizza restaurant, you might go to burgers, you might go to exclusively a salad place. So there always all that ground noise will be there. And for cousins, it's just about, well, how can I help you make a decision to come to cousins?
You just mentioned values, Christine, and I think that's another reason for your success is community impact. I know how seriously you take that. I assume you got that from the founders, including your dad.
That's right. So, we have our Make It Better Foundation,
Yeah,
right? And that focuses on health and wellness, hunger, youth education. What's so great about our product is that it's very portable. So we can support communities by literally helping and giving product, right? Of course, we have our foundation where we can give funds and support usually very small organizations because our foundation isn't that large, but we can make a big impact on these smaller organizations. We support education, whether it's through legacy education awards for employees here at Cousins, or through scholarships for people that are going to college who aren't affiliated with Cousins. So there's a lot of different ways we can do that. And again, that's why I tell the teams, hey, we have to make and sell as many subs as we can, because by doing that, we can support our communities. We can support individuals who have needs and really be there for them and be part of that. We provide, like, corporately, we have over 1,000 employees right now. So in that way, I feel very strongly about the fact that we're actively engaged in our local economy. We're actively giving back, but we can do more than that through our foundation.
mhm,
That was something that was started by Bill and Jim. They just didn't brand it and market it in the same way, because back then you didn't,
sure.
right? You kind of wrote the check out at the end of the year and you quietly gave it to the organization. Consumer demands have changed, and consumers want to know, what good are you doing out there? Are you just taking my money and am I just getting a sandwich, or are you doing good?
Yeah.
And so it's important for us, without sounding arrogant, to let the community know how we are there for them and helping people, who could be our neighbors.
Christine, I've known you a little bit for a long, long time,
Oh,
but I've admired you and respected you from a distance for equally as long. So I commend what you've done. I commend the entire spirit of Cousins, and I really appreciate your time today on Wisconsin Icons. I hope you take care and continued great success.
thanks, Bob. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.